The great hall of the Galactic Council felt empty. Ambassador Zethkar stood at his speaking podium and looked at the 17 seats that remained filled. 3 months ago there had been 20 seats. The 3 empty chairs belonged to the humans. The morning light from the station's artificial sun streamed through the tall windows. It hit the polished metal of the human seats and made them shine. But no humans sat in them anymore. No humans would ever sit in them again. Zethkar touched the control panel in front of him. His forearms moved with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times before. The daily session of the Galactic Council was about to begin. But today, like every day for the past 3 months, something was wrong. Council members, Zethkar said into his speaking device. His voice echoed through the hall. We gather today to discuss the ongoing situation with our former human allies. Minister Quen of the Nexari shifted in her seat. Her 6 eyes blinked in the pattern that meant worry. She had been asking the same questions for weeks now. Why did the humans leave? What had they done wrong? How could they fix this? The economic reports are getting worse, Quen said. Her voice was high and sharp, the way Nexari voices got when they were scared. Trade routes that the humans managed are falling apart. Ship schedules are a mess. We're losing money every day. Admiral Thos made a sound like rocks grinding together. The Crobian was built like a mountain of gray stone, and he thought like one too. Slow and hard to change. The humans were never that important, he said. We managed fine before they joined us. We'll manage fine now. Zethkar wanted to believe that. He really did. But the reports on his desk told a different story. In just 3 months since the humans left, everything was going wrong. The communication networks were failing. Systems that had worked perfectly for decades were breaking down. Trade ships were getting lost because the navigation computers couldn't find the best routes anymore. Some colonies were running out of food because the supply chains were confused. Maybe we should talk about why they left, said Minister Vex of the Draconi. Her reptilian head turned to look at each council member. They didn't give us a real reason. Just those formal letters saying they were resigning from all positions. Zethkar remembered that day very clearly. It had started like any other day. The humans had been quiet during the morning session, but they were often quiet. They listened more than they spoke. That had always annoyed some of the other council members. Then, during the lunch break, Human Ambassador Sarah Chen had walked up to his desk. She had handed him 3 sealed documents. One was her resignation as head of the human delegation. One was the resignation of the human trade representative. The third was the resignation of the human military advisor. We're leaving, she had said simply. No anger in her voice. No sadness. Just a calm statement of fact. Leaving? Zethkar had asked. Leaving the session? The station? Leaving the council, Sarah had replied. Permanently. All human personnel will be gone by tomorrow morning. We'll send someone to collect our personal belongings later. That had been it. No dramatic speech. No list of complaints. No ultimatum demanding changes. The humans had just left, and they had been thorough about it. By the next morning, every human was gone. The computer systems they had managed were locked with access codes that no one else knew. The trade agreements they had negotiated were canceled. The military intelligence they had provided stopped coming. It was like they had never been there at all. Except for the empty chairs and the growing list of problems. I think we should send another message, said Minister Quen. Ask them to come back. Offer them better terms. Admiral Thos snorted. We don't need them. Let them go back to their little corner of space. We're better off without them. But Zethkar noticed that even Thos looked worried. The Admiral's military reports were full of problems. Pirate attacks were up 300%. Border disputes that had been quiet for years were turning violent. And the early warning systems that had helped prevent conflicts were all offline. Sir, said a young aide who had approached his chair. The aide was one of his own species with the same forearms and blue-green skin. You asked me to research what the humans actually did here. Zethkar nodded. What did you find? The aide looked at his data pad. It's extensive, sir. The humans were involved in more things than we realized. They managed the main communication network between all member worlds. They created the translation software that lets us all understand each other. They designed the trade route optimization programs that our merchants use. Go on, Zethkar said. He had a feeling this list was going to be long. They also ran the conflict prediction algorithms that warned us about potential wars. They maintained the shared cultural databases that helped different species understand each other. They organized the interspecies festivals and exchange programs. The aide paused and looked at more data. They also provided the economic modeling that helped us set fair trade rates between species with different types of resources. And they operated the Emergency Response Coordination Center that helped during natural disasters and accidents. The hall was very quiet now. Every council member was listening. "How much of this did we know about?" asked Minister Vex. The aide looked uncomfortable. "Most of it was in the background, sir. The humans never made a big deal about any of it. They just did it. They filed reports, but they were always very simple. Just basic updates on system status and efficiency improvements." Zethkar felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Show me the attendance records for council sessions over the past 5 years." The aide worked with his data pad for a moment. Then he put the information up on the main screen where everyone could see it. The numbers were clear. The humans had attended every single session. They had been present for every vote, every debate, every emergency meeting. Their attendance rate was 100%. "Now show me how often they spoke during sessions," Zethkar said. More numbers appeared. The humans had spoken less than any other species. They asked few questions. They made few proposals. When they did speak, it was usually to offer technical solutions to problems or to suggest compromises during arguments and show me how many of their proposals were accepted. The final set of numbers made the cold feeling in Zethkar's stomach turn to ice. Out of 47 proposals the humans had made over 5 years, only 3 had been accepted. The rest had been voted down or simply ignored. Minister Quen was staring at the screen. "We barely listened to them," she said softly. "They never complained," added Minister Vex. "Not once in all the time they were here." Admiral Thos was looking at his own data pad now. His rocky face was harder to read than the others, but Zethkar thought he looked worried. "My military advisors are telling me that we used human intelligence reports for 80% of our security decisions. They provided data on ship movements, resource flows, and potential conflict zones. And now?" Zethkar asked. "Now we're flying blind," Thos admitted. The session continued for another hour, but nothing useful got decided. How could it? They were finally starting to understand what they had lost, but they still didn't understand why the humans had left. That evening, Zethkar stayed late in his office. He pulled up all the communication records from the human delegation. He read every report they had filed, every message they had sent, every proposal they had made. A picture began to form. A picture of a species that had worked quietly and efficiently to help everyone else. A species that had asked for very little in return. A species that had been ignored, dismissed, and taken for granted, and now they were gone. And the Galactic Council was starting to fall apart without them. Minister Quen stood in front of the main display screen in the council chamber. The numbers glowing there made her feel sick. In just 4 months since the humans had left, galactic trade had dropped by 30%. That was not just bad. That was a disaster. "The shipping companies are losing money every day," she told the other council members. Her 6 eyes moved quickly as she looked from one face to another. "Routes that used to take 5 days now take 12 days. Ships are getting lost. Some are running out of fuel." Ambassador Zethkar leaned forward in his chair. "What exactly is happening?" Quen touched her control pad. New numbers appeared on the screen. The humans created something called the Universal Route Optimization System. Every ship in galactic space used it. It calculated the fastest and safest path between any 2 points, taking into account things like solar storms, asteroid fields, and traffic congestion. She paused and took a deep breath. When the humans left, they took the access codes with them. The system is still running, but it's locked. No one can update it or fix problems. Admiral Thos crossed his massive arms. "How hard can it be? It's just a navigation computer." "Sir," said one of Quen's aides, a nervous young Nixari, "we've had our best computer experts trying to break into the system for 3 months. They say it would take years to recreate what the humans built. Maybe decades." The aide brought up more information. "The system doesn't just calculate routes. It also predicts traffic patterns, monitors space weather, tracks asteroid movements, and coordinates with thousands of different planetary control systems. And it does this for over 10,000 regularly traveled routes across the galaxy." Zethkar felt that cold feeling in his stomach again. "What else are we discovering?" Minister Vex of the Draconi spoke up. "The translation systems are failing too. We're having trouble communicating with some of our own colonies. She explained how the human-created translation program worked. It didn't just convert words from one language to another. It understood context, cultural meaning, and even emotional tone. When a Crobian said something in their rock-grinding language, the system knew how to make it sound appropriately polite in Nexari or properly formal in Velkarian. Without the constant updates the humans provided, the system is making more and more mistakes, Vex said. Yesterday, a trade agreement between the Gellans and the Rythians almost fell apart because the translation system converted friendship into conquest threat. But the worst news came from the Emergency Services Coordinator. Commander Hex was a four-armed Zeridian who managed disaster response across Council space. Her report made everyone in the room feel helpless. The human emergency response system coordinated rescue efforts across all member worlds, she explained. When there was a mining accident on Crobian Prime, or a storm on Nexari 7, the system automatically contacted the nearest ships with the right equipment and expertise. She showed them a map of recent disasters. Red dots marked places where bad things had happened. Green lines showed where help had come from. Before the humans left, the green lines formed a neat pattern of efficient responses. After they left, the map looked like chaos. Response times have increased by 400%, Hex continued. We've lost over 3,000 lives in situations where we could have saved them if the old system was still working. The room fell silent. 3,000 lives. That was not just numbers on a screen anymore, but it got worse. Much worse. Ambassador Zethkar had asked his staff to investigate something that had been bothering him. Why had so many old conflicts started up again? Border disputes that had been quiet for years were suddenly turning violent. Trade disagreements that used to get settled quickly were now causing lasting problems. His aide brought the answer. Sir, the humans operated something called the Conflict Prevention Network. It was a system that watched for early signs of trouble between different groups. The aide explained how it worked. The system monitored news reports, trade data, population movements, and even social media posts across all member worlds. When it detected patterns that usually led to conflict, it would quietly alert the right people to step in and solve problems before they got serious. How many conflicts did it prevent? Zethkar asked. In the past 5 years, the system flagged 137 potential conflicts. Human diplomats helped resolve 134 of them before they became serious problems. Admiral Thos looked uncomfortable. What happened to the 3 that weren't resolved? Those became the Kelos Border War, the Praxis trade conflict, and the Tethys Colony Rebellion. Each of those conflicts cost thousands of lives and billions of credits. Now, without the early warning system, small problems were growing into big ones. The Vegan Mining Consortium and the Altair Transport Guild were fighting over shipping rights. 2 minor species were arguing about mineral rights in an asteroid field. 3 different colonies were claiming the same uninhabited planet. It's like we've gone blind, Admiral Thos admitted. My intelligence officers used to get reports about potential trouble spots every day. Now they spend all their time trying to figure out what's happening after it's already too late to stop it. Minister Quinn had more bad news. The economic modeling systems are failing too. The humans created algorithms that helped us set fair prices for interspecies trade. Without them, everyone is arguing about what things should cost. She showed them examples. Crobian metal used to trade for Nexari food at rates that both species thought were fair. Now the Crobians thought they were being cheated, and the Nexari thought they were being overcharged. Similar problems were happening everywhere. Some species are threatening to stop trading with others entirely, Quinn said. The Draconi Confederacy says they're going to create their own trade network that doesn't include any of the species they think are taking advantage of them. Ambassador Zethkar realized something that made him feel even sicker. We're not just losing the systems the humans built. We're losing trust in each other. He was right. Without the neutral human systems to manage things fairly, every species was starting to suspect that others were cheating them. The Crobians thought the Nexari were manipulating food prices. The Nexari thought the Velkarians were controlling shipping routes. The Velkarians thought everyone else was forming secret alliances against them. I've been getting reports from my intelligence network, Admiral Thos said reluctantly. 3 minor species are talking about leaving the Council entirely. They think they can do better on their own. Which ones? Zethkar asked. The Centurions, the Pollux Federation, and the Rigel Alliance. They say the Council isn't providing them with any benefits anymore, so why should they follow Council decisions? The session went on for hours. Every department head had similar stories. Systems failing, services stopping, problems growing bigger every day. But the most disturbing report came at the end. Commander Hex had been investigating something strange. "Sir, we've been trying to contact the human colonies to ask for help with some of the technical problems. And? They're not answering. I mean, they answer, but not in a helpful way. We get polite automated messages saying that human technical support is no longer available to non-human entities. All requests are directed to contact other council species for assistance." She paused. "It's like they've cut us off completely. Not just the council, but all of galactic civilization. They're acting like we don't exist." Minister Vex had tried something similar. "I sent a message to the Human Cultural Exchange Office asking about the interspecies festivals they used to organize. I got back a message saying that humans were no longer participating in galactic cultural events and suggesting I contact other species to organize our own activities." As the council members filed out of the chamber that day, Zethkar noticed something he had never seen before. They weren't talking to each other. Usually after sessions, different species would cluster together, making deals, sharing information, building relationships. Today, everyone left alone. The Crobians didn't trust the Nixari. The Nixari were angry at the Velcarians. The smaller species were afraid of everyone else. The humans had been more than just participants in the Galactic Council. They had been the glue that held it together. And now that glue was gone. Zethkar stayed in the chamber after everyone else had left. He looked at the 3 empty human chairs and wondered if it was already too late to fix what they had broken. Admiral Thos stared at the military situation display in his command center. Red warning lights blinked across the galactic map like angry stars. 6 months ago, this map had been mostly green, showing peaceful, stable regions. Now it looked like a disease was spreading across council space. "Report," he growled to his aide, a young Crobian officer named Grex. "Sir, we have active conflicts in 12 sectors. The Kellos and Vagan forces are fighting over 3 star systems. The Altair Transport Guild has declared war on the Procyon Shipping Collective, and the situation in the Outer Rim is getting worse every day." Thos made the grinding sound that meant he was thinking hard. "What about our peacekeeping forces?" "Stretched too thin, sir. We have ships responding to emergencies across the galaxy, but we're always arriving too late. By the time we get there, what started as a minor dispute has become a full military conflict." The Admiral studied the map more carefully. There was a pattern here, something that bothered him. "Grex, show me the patrol routes we used before the humans left." New lines appeared on the map. Green paths showed where Council peacekeeping ships had traveled regularly, keeping an eye on potential trouble spots. But there were also blue lines that Thos had never noticed before. "What are those blue paths?" he asked. Grex checked his data. "Those were human patrol routes, sir. Human ships traveled those paths regularly, but they weren't officially part of our peacekeeping force." "What do you mean?" "The humans called them cultural exchange missions and trade surveys, sir. But looking at the data now, they were clearly monitoring for security threats. They filed reports about unusual ship movements, resource stockpiling, and military buildups." Thos felt that familiar cold feeling. "How many reports?" "Over the past 5 years, human observers filed 2,147 reports about potential security concerns. Our intelligence division used those reports to decide where to send our official patrol ships." The Admiral realized what this meant. The humans had been doing the intelligence work that let his forces know where problems were developing. Without that information, his peacekeeping ships were flying blind, reacting to crises instead of preventing them. "Sir," Grex continued, "there's something else. The human ships weren't just observing. They were also intervening." "Intervening how?" "Small things, sir. Offering technical assistance to colonies that were struggling, mediating disputes between mining operations, providing emergency supplies to remote outposts. Nothing big enough to require official reports, but enough to stop small problems from becoming big ones." Thos finished. He was starting to understand something that made him very uncomfortable. The humans hadn't just been members of the Galactic Council. They had been the Council's immune system, quietly fighting off infections before anyone else even knew they existed. In the Cultural Affairs section of the station, Minister Vex was having her own disturbing realizations. She had been trying to organize the annual Interspecies Arts Festival, something that had happened every year for the past 2 decades. The problem, her aide explained, is that no one can agree on anything anymore. Vex looked at the stack of complaints on her desk. The Crobians said the festival location was too warm for their people. The Nexari said it was too cold. The Draconi wanted the music louder. The Velcarians wanted it quieter. The Centaurians said the food was wrong for their digestive systems. The Pollux Federation claimed the schedule conflicted with their religious observances. How did we handle these problems before? Vex asked. Her aide, a young Draconi named Sis, checked the historical records. The humans created what they called compromise protocols, Minister. When species disagreed about festival arrangements, the Human Cultural Office would find solutions that worked for everyone. Such as, they designed modular environment suits that let species with different environmental needs attend the same events. They created translation programs that could handle artistic and emotional concepts, not just basic communication. They developed food preparation techniques that could accommodate multiple digestive systems safely. Sis showed her more data, but it wasn't just technical solutions. The humans also studied what each species found beautiful, interesting, or meaningful. They used that knowledge to create art forms that could be appreciated by multiple species at the same time. Vex remembered the festival performances from previous years. There had been something magical about them. Music that somehow sounded good to species with completely different hearing ranges. Visual art that looked beautiful to creatures with different types of eyes. Dance performances that conveyed emotion to beings with different body structures. Did we ever ask how they did this? Vex asked. I don't think so, Minister. We just enjoyed it. The humans never made a big deal about the work involved. They just made it happen. Now, trying to organize the festival without human help, Vex was discovering how much work had been involved. Different species weren't just physically different. They had completely different ideas about what art should be, what music should sound like, what stories were worth telling. Without human mediation, these differences were causing arguments instead of creating beautiful mixed cultural events. In the economic sector, Minister Quinn was facing an even worse crisis. The galactic economy wasn't just struggling anymore. It was starting to collapse. Trade volume is down 60%, her economic advisor reported. But that's not the worst part. Species are starting to form separate trading blocks that exclude other species entirely. Quinn studied the trade flow charts. Before the humans left, trade had been like a vast web connecting every inhabited world. Now that web was breaking into separate pieces. The Crobian Empire is only trading with species they consider military allies, the advisor continued. The Nexari Commonwealth has created an exclusive agricultural exchange that doesn't include any species they think compete with their farming worlds. The Draconi Confederacy has formed a luxury goods consortium that charges huge fees to species they don't like. Why is this happening now? Quinn asked. Without the human trade mediation systems, every species thinks the others are cheating them. They're all trying to protect themselves by forming smaller groups with people they trust more. But this was making the problem worse, not better. When the Crobians stopped trading with the Nexari, both sides lost access to resources they needed. When the Draconi started charging extra fees to species they didn't like, those species found other suppliers, which hurt Draconi businesses. It's like watching a healthy organism tear itself apart, Quinn's advisor said. The economic problems were causing political problems too. Ambassador Zethkar was getting reports of serious internal conflicts within several member species. On Nexari Prime, there were protests demanding that the government withdraw from the Galactic Council entirely. The protesters said the council was costing them money and providing no benefits. On Crobian worlds, military leaders were calling for aggressive action against species they blamed for economic problems. 3 minor species had already announced they were leaving the council. The Centrans said they could manage their affairs better on their own. The Pollux Federation claimed the council had become a tool for larger species to exploit smaller ones. The Rigel Alliance simply stopped sending representatives and stopped answering council communications. We're not just losing the systems the humans built, Zethkar told his senior staff. We're losing the trust and cooperation that made the council possible in the first place. His aide had been researching human activities more thoroughly. Sir, I've been analyzing the humans' participation in council activities over the past decade. They weren't just passive members. They were actively working to build relationships between different species. How so? They organized joint research projects that gave different species reasons to work together. They created exchange programs that let young people from different worlds learn about each other, They sponsored cultural events that helped species understand and appreciate their differences. The aide showed him data about hundreds of small human-sponsored activities. None of them had seemed very important at the time. An art exhibition here, a scientific conference there, a sports competition involving multiple species, but altogether, the aide said, these activities created personal relationships between individuals from different species. Those relationships made it easier for their governments to trust each other and work together. Now those relationship-building activities had stopped. Worse, without human mediation, the differences between species were starting to seem like barriers instead of interesting variations. Sir, the aide said quietly, I think we need to accept that the humans weren't just another member species. They were the foundation that our entire alliance was built on, and now that foundation is gone. That evening, Zethkar stood alone in the council chamber, looking at the 3 empty human chairs. Around him, the great hall that had once been filled with the voices of 20 species working together was quiet and cold. For the first time since the humans had left, he wondered if the Galactic Council could survive without them. And for the first time, he wasn't sure the answer was yes. Ambassador Zethkar stood at the window of his office and watched another ship leave the station. It was a Centaurian diplomatic vessel, carrying the last representatives of the Centaurian Republic away from the Galactic Council forever. That made 5 species that had withdrawn completely in the past 2 months. The council chamber now had only 12 occupied seats. 8 species had left entirely. 4 others had stopped sending representatives and only communicated through occasional messages. Sir, his aide said from behind his desk, the Emergency Economic Committee is ready for your review. Zethkar turned around and looked at the report. The numbers were so bad they almost didn't seem real. Galactic trade was down 78%. Unemployment on most council worlds was over 30%. 3 member species were experiencing serious food shortages because their supply chains had collapsed. What about the delegation to human space? Zethkar asked. Any word from them? They're on their way back, sir. But the preliminary reports are not encouraging. The delegation had been his last hope. Minister Quen, Admiral Thos, and Minister Vex had traveled to the edge of human territory 3 weeks ago. Their mission was simple: convince the humans to come back, offer them whatever they wanted, apologize for whatever needed apologizing for, just get them to help before everything fell apart completely. Sir, his aide continued, we're also getting reports of active warfare breaking out in the Outer Rim. The Vegan-Kelos conflict has spread to 4 more systems, and the Draconi Confederacy has declared military intervention. Zethkar closed his eyes. Military intervention meant the largest remaining council member was taking sides in the conflict instead of trying to stop it. That was exactly the kind of thing the old peacekeeping systems would have prevented, but the old systems were gone. Just like everything else the humans had built. A communication alert sounded in his office. The delegation was requesting permission to dock. Finally, he would get some answers. An hour later, Minister Quen, Admiral Thos, and Minister Vex sat in Zethkar's office. None of them looked happy. Report, Zethkar said. Minister Quen spoke first. The humans were polite, very polite. They met with us, listened to our proposals, and gave us a complete tour of their border facilities. And they said no. Very politely, but absolutely no. Admiral Thos leaned forward in his chair. It's worse than that. They're not just refusing to help us. They're doing fine without us. Better than fine. Minister Vex nodded. Their colonies are prosperous and peaceful. Their technology is more advanced than we realized. And they've formed some kind of alliance with species we've never heard of. What do you mean? Zethkar asked. Quen answered. We saw ships from at least 6 different species at human stations. But they weren't any of the council species. When we asked about them, the humans said they were new partners from regions of space that the council had never explored. The humans have been busy, Thos added. While we've been falling apart, they've been building something new. Something that doesn't include us. Vex showed Zethkar images from their trip. Human colonies that looked like gardens, space stations that hummed with activity, ships moving in organized patterns that spoke of efficient, well-managed traffic control. They have everything working, Vex said. All the systems that stopped working for us are running perfectly in human space, and their new allies are using the same systems. What did they say when you asked them to come back? Zethkar asked. The 3 delegates looked at each other uncomfortably. They said, Quen began slowly, that they had tried for 10 years to be good members of the Galactic Council. They said they had offered solutions to problems and been ignored. They said they had provided services that kept the Council running and been taken for granted. They weren't angry, Vex added. That was the strangest part. They weren't bitter or upset. They just seemed done with us. Admiral Thoss looked more uncomfortable than the others. The human admiral I spoke with showed me something. A detailed record of every military intelligence report they had filed with us over the past 5 years, and a record of how many times we had acted on their recommendations, which was less than 20%. They had warned us about 43 potential conflicts that could have been prevented with early intervention. We acted on 8 of those warnings. The other 35 became exactly the kind of wars they had predicted. Thoss paused. She also showed me the casualty figures for those wars. Over 50,000 dead, people who would still be alive if we had listened to human intelligence reports. The room fell silent. 50,000 people dead because they had ignored human warnings. There's something else, Quen said quietly. We asked them what it would take to get them to reconsider, what kind of deal they would accept, and they said there was no deal. They said they had learned an important lesson about trying to help people who didn't want to be helped. They said they were much happier working with species who valued their contributions. Vex added, they gave us a gift before we left, a complete record of everything they had done for the Council over the past 10 years. Every system they had built, every problem they had solved, every service they had provided. She handed Zethkar a data crystal. They said they wanted us to understand exactly what we had chosen to give up. That evening, Zethkar loaded the crystal into his personal computer. What he found there made him feel sick to his stomach. The humans had documented everything, every piece of software they had written, every algorithm they had created, every system they had maintained, every problem they had solved quietly in the background while the Council members argued about more visible issues. The list went on for hundreds of pages. Communication networks, trade optimization systems, conflict prediction algorithms, cultural exchange programs, emergency response coordination, economic modeling, diplomatic mediation services, technical support for colonies, educational exchanges, research coordination, resource sharing protocols, and more, so much more. The humans had created and maintained the invisible infrastructure that made galactic civilization possible. They had been the engineers keeping the lights on while everyone else argued about politics. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the other data the crystal contained. Records of council meetings where human proposals had been dismissed without discussion. Vote tallies showing human initiatives being rejected by large margins. Communication logs showing human offers of assistance being ignored or declined. There was also a psychological profile analysis that made Zethkar's blood run cold. The humans had known exactly how the other council species saw them. Primitive, emotional, intellectually inferior, not worth listening to, and they had accepted that assessment. Instead of arguing or demanding respect, they had simply worked harder to prove their value through actions rather than words. For 10 years, they had been the most competent, most helpful, most essential member of the Galactic Council. And for 10 years, the other members had treated them like junior partners who should be grateful to be included. The crystal contained one final document. A letter addressed to our former colleagues in the Galactic Council. Zethkar read it twice before he fully understood what it said. We harbor no anger toward any of you. We understand that different species have different ways of valuing contributions and different ideas about cooperation. We have learned that our approach to building relationships through service and reliability is not universally appreciated. We have found new partners who share our values and appreciate our contributions. Together, we are building something better than what we had before. We wish you success in your future endeavors. We will not be returning to the Galactic Council under any circumstances. This decision is final. We suggest you focus on learning to work together without expecting any one member to quietly maintain the systems that make cooperation possible. True partnership requires that all members contribute equally and that all contributions be valued appropriately. We hope you will take this opportunity to build something better than what you have lost. The letter was signed by the human ambassador, but it was clearly an official statement from the entire human government. Zethkar sat in his office for a long time after reading that letter. Outside his window, he could see the lights of the station growing dimmer as more systems failed and fewer people remained to maintain them. The humans were gone. They were never coming back, and they were right to leave. For the first time since this crisis began, Zethkar admitted to himself what he had been afraid to think. The Galactic Council was dying, and it was dying because they had driven away the one species that had made it work. The question now was whether anything could be saved from the wreckage, and whether the remaining species could learn to value each other before it was too late. Ambassador Zethkar walked through the empty corridors of the Council station. His footsteps echoed in halls that had once been filled with the sounds of 20 different species working together. Now there was only silence. It had been 1 year since the humans left, 6 months since the Galactic Council had officially dissolved. The vote to dissolve had been unanimous among the 7 species that still had representatives present. There hadn't been much choice. With only 7 members left, they couldn't maintain the infrastructure needed to keep the council running. They couldn't afford the station. They couldn't staff the various departments. They couldn't even keep the lights on in all the sections. Zethkar stopped at the entrance to the main council chamber. The doors were locked now. Inside, 20 chairs sat in a circle, waiting for representatives who would never return. He had stayed behind to oversee the final shutdown procedures. Someone had to make sure sensitive information was properly secured, and that the various species got back any property they had left behind. It was a job no one else wanted, so he had volunteered. In 3 days, the last transport would arrive to take him home to Velkara Prime. The station would be abandoned after that, left to drift in space as a monument to what might have been. His personal communicator buzzed. A message from his government, asking for his final report on the council dissolution. He would write it tonight, but he already knew what it would say. The Galactic Council had died because its members had taken its most valuable contributor for granted. The humans had been the foundation that everything else was built on, and without them the entire structure had collapsed. The numbers told the story clearly. In the year since the humans left, galactic trade volume had dropped by 85%. 4 major wars were ongoing across former council space. Economic cooperation between species had almost entirely stopped. The carefully built network of cultural and scientific exchanges had disappeared. Some species had tried to form smaller alliances with their neighbors. The Crobians and Draconi had created a military partnership focused on border security. The Nexari had formed an agricultural cooperative with 3 smaller species. The Velkarians were trying to rebuild trade relationships on a bilateral basis, but none of these smaller groups worked very well. Without the humans' neutral mediation and technical expertise, the different species couldn't trust each other enough to make their partnerships effective. Zethkar had heard rumors about what the humans were doing in their part of space. The report suggested they were thriving. Their alliance with unknown species was growing stronger. They had created new technologies that made their ships faster and their colonies more prosperous. Some of the rumors said the humans had found a way to travel between stars that was faster than anything the council species had ever developed. Others claimed they had solved the food production problems that plagued most colonies. There were even stories about humans helping primitive species develop their technology and join their alliance as equals. Whether the rumors were true or not, one thing was clear: the humans were doing fine without the Galactic Council. They had moved on and built something better. The same couldn't be said for the former council species. On Crobian Prime, unemployment was at 60%, because the mining operations depended on trade routes that no longer functioned. On Nexari worlds, food shortages were common because the agricultural distribution systems had broken down. The Draconi Confederacy was spending more on military operations than they earned from trade, slowly bankrupting their government. 3 of the smaller species were facing complete economic collapse. The Centaurians had withdrawn from galactic civilization entirely, cutting off all communication with other species. The Pollux Federation was in the middle of a civil war between groups that wanted to try rejoining the galactic community and groups that wanted to remain isolated. Zethkar entered his office and sat down at his desk for the last time. Around him, boxes contained the personal belongings of all the council staff who had worked here over the years. Most of them had found new jobs on their home worlds, but many were struggling because Their skills had been specific to managing interspecies cooperation. He opened his computer and began typing his final report. The dissolution of the Galactic Council represents the failure of 17 species to recognize and value the contributions of the 18th. Our analysis shows that humanity provided essential services that maintained the stability and prosperity of the entire alliance. When we lost their cooperation, we lost the foundation of our civilization. The primary cause of this failure was our collective inability to see past our initial prejudices about human capabilities. We viewed humans as a primitive species that was fortunate to be included in our advanced galactic community. This prevented us from recognizing that they had become the most essential member of that community. Human contributions were largely invisible because they focused on making systems work rather than taking credit for their achievements. They maintained infrastructure, prevented conflicts, and solved problems quietly and efficiently because their work happened in the background. We assumed it was not important. When humans offered suggestions or warnings, we dismissed them because we believed our species were more intelligent and experienced. When they provided services that kept our society functioning, we took those services for granted because we believed they were simple tasks that anyone could perform. We have learned that this was a serious mistake. The complexity and importance of human contributions only became clear after they were gone. The lesson for future interspecies cooperation is clear. Judge members by their contributions, not by preconceptions about their capabilities. Value those who work to maintain the systems that benefit everyone, even if their work is not highly visible. Listen to warnings and suggestions from all members, regardless of their perceived status. Most importantly, remember that in any cooperative venture, those who maintain the foundation deserve the most respect, not the least. Zethkar paused in his writing and looked out the window. In the distance, he could see a human ship passing through the system. It was heading toward the outer rim, probably carrying supplies to one of their new colonies or visiting one of their new allies. The ship was sleek and elegant, clearly built with technology more advanced than anything the Council species had developed. It moved with purpose and confidence, like it belonged to people who knew exactly where they were going. He wondered if anyone on that ship remembered the Galactic Council. He wondered if they ever thought about their former colleagues or felt sad about what had been lost. Probably not. The humans had tried for 10 years to make the Council work. They had given their best effort, been rejected, and moved on to something better. They had no reason to look back. Zethkar finished his report and sent it to his government. Then he began packing his own belongings. In 3 days, he would return to Velkara Prime and try to help his people figure out how to survive in a galaxy where they could no longer depend on human systems to make everything work. It would be difficult. His species had become accustomed to the prosperity and stability that human management had provided. But maybe they would learn from this experience. Maybe they would figure out how to build real partnerships based on mutual respect and shared effort. Maybe they would create something better than what they had lost. Or maybe they would continue to struggle with the same prejudices and assumptions that had destroyed the Council in the first place. Time would tell. On his last night in the station, Zethkar walked through the abandoned sections one more time. He stopped at the human quarters, which had been empty for over a year now. The rooms were clean and neat, just as the humans had left them. In one office, he found something the cleanup crews had missed. A small plant in a ceramic pot sitting on a windowsill. Somehow it had survived a year without care, growing toward the artificial light from the corridor. He picked up the plant and looked at it carefully. It was a simple thing, not particularly beautiful or impressive, but it had endured. It had adapted to difficult conditions and found a way to survive. Maybe there was a lesson in that. Maybe the former Council species could learn to be like this plant. Maybe they could find ways to survive and grow, even in the harsh conditions they had created for themselves. Or maybe some things, once lost, could never be recovered. Zethkar carried the plant with him as he left the station for the final time. Behind him, the great council chambers grew dark and silent. Ahead, uncertain future waited. The humans had moved on to build something better. Now it was time for everyone else to figure out what came next. In the depths of space, the human ship continued its journey toward the outer rim, carrying people who had learned that sometimes the best way to deal with those who don't value you is simply to leave them behind and find others who do. The galaxy was a big place. There was always room for new alliances, new partnerships, and new ways of building civilization together. The humans had found their place in it. Now the question was whether anyone else would learn to do the same.